Hello, I'm Sally-Ann Ashley. I'm a UK-based abstract artist, and I also run a course for artists and creatives called Creative Shift. Creative Shift is a 10-week program based on my own creative practice of navigating the shifts in my work. Each time I become stuck in the studio or frustrated, I now have a framework that I can apply each time my work evolves. I've now shared my framework with many artists and witnessed numerous shifts on both the personal and practical level. I hear artists talking about how free they feel in their work, how much more confident they feel, how courageous they are in the studio. So if you're wondering if creative shifts for you this year, I've interviewed some previous course members and asked them to share a little bit about their experience on the course and how it impacted their practice, in the hope that it'll answer some questions that you have. I hope you enjoy the videos. And if you have any questions, please contact me on the links below. Thank you. Today I'm chatting with Fee Cameron. Fee joined Creative Shift last year, and I've invited her here today to share a little bit about her experience of the course and how it impacted her practice. So welcome, Fee. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Sally-Ann. It's so nice to be chatting with you again.
Nice to see you again. So if we could just start if you could just tell me a little bit about your creative practice and how long you've been creating for.
So I studied visual arts when I first left school, at uni. And so that was about 30 years ago that I graduated. I majored in sculpture and I was doing found object sculpture then. Probably since then I've mostly done found object sculpture. And so my practice has sort of been a bit on and again, off again. I have supported myself with other jobs, create other creative endeavors along the way, and had times when I've dedicated myself to 100% to my arts practice, and other times when I've just had other jobs and done it on the side. And probably the main thing's found object sculpture, but it probably always did a lot of drawing as well. And more recently, was trying to get into painting and teach myself to paint. And that sort of was my mission up until probably Creative Shift, where kind of changed direction again.
Okay, so quite a varied practice you've got going on there. It's quite interesting. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say that the sculpture was really just whatever materials I've had at hand and is sort of inspired by those materials. And so really what I've produced has been very varied depending on what I could find.
What you have available. Okay.
Yeah.
So what was it that drew you to Creative Shift this year?
Well, I have recently been through a pretty challenging time in my life, and I'd not really been doing any art through that period. And I came to a point where I really decided I need to reconnect with self and find out who I was again. And I realized that my arts practice is sort of my point of reference to know who I am, or it was probably the only thing that I really knew was solid and that I could trust, and that I felt confident and reassured that I knew that space. And so I made a deliberate decision probably a year before starting Creative Shift that I was going to return to my arts practice, and I had done a couple of courses, or a series of courses actually, just to courses that sort of helped me get back into that sort of play space and experiment. And I had made a decision that, okay, I'm going to pick up my arts practice and treat it like a business. I'd had a bit of an e-commerce business on the side, and sort of got to a point I had to return to full-time work, and I was caring for kids, and it sort of fell by the wayside. And I decided, why am I spending all this effort marketing someone else's product? Why don't I just put that energy into my art and try and market my art? But I had a very business sort of head about it, and I'd done an arts business course as one of those courses in that series, and then it's like, but I don't actually know what my product is. And so I realized I had to actually get back to a way to authentically discover what that product was, and have some process and a framework sort of for driving my practice forward. So really I was hoping to sort of reconnect with myself, but with my practice, and have a framework. So when I saw the material that you were offering, it very much seemed to be around that framework for your practice. And so that's what attracted me to it in the first place.
Okay, so and what was your experience of the course?
Well, it was actually quite life-changing for me. It was more than a way to sort of unpack and my art. It actually was a self-inquiry process, which sort of was art and life and where I was at that time. And it really helped me to navigate and understand what my needs were, understand the feelings, and kind of shift my head from what was feeling quite negative and heavy. And I felt quite trapped. I, had a relationship breakdown. I was sole care of my children, including one with disabilities, and I was feeling quite glass half empty, and which was a really strange place for me, because I've always been quite positive and sort of resilient to sort of disruption. And so I think the course was, it sort of was exactly what I needed. And I think the series of exercises that you provided us had this sort of natural flow and allowed that inquiry. I found at the end of each week that I'd kind of land in a place that was actually what the next week's exercise was. It was really interesting. That inquiry process seemed to flow naturally, so that you'd intuitively end up at the next phase of the course almost preemptively. It was really interesting. And I think one of the strengths of it, or why I got so much out of it, was that I made sure I had sort of set an intention at the beginning that I was going to participate in the group conversations.
Okay.
And those I really enjoyed sharing and hearing from the group, and it made me realize that connection is a really important thing for me, which I think, if I reflect back, I know that it always has been, but I think at this point in my life I realized that human connection added so much value to my well-being and for my ability to kind of process and understand and myself, really, as much as anything. And I could see that actually everyone in the group was really connected by these universal experiences and needs and feelings, and that shared experience just kind of amplified the ability to gain insights and share, and it allowed me to, I think the process of articulating in the group forced me to really hone in and nail what it was that was going on for me. So there was, it was quite incredible, actually, that process.
I think you mentioned something really important there, that although I don't say that this is one of the sort of assets of the course about learning to it's like learning a new language for your work and learning how to articulate it, because we talk about it and think about it so intensely over those weeks. It does, like you say, force you to really it kind of clarifies your ideas around what you're doing naturally because there's so much attention focused on it. And we come out of,
Yes.
I think what I find is artists come out of Creative Shift not only feeling much clearer about their direction, but they have a way of talking about their work that's it just feels like it's like the realization of just what's happening in your practice, and you know you're able to nail it, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think well, two things. I think those group conversations that we would do, and it wasn't just the online. We would have those face-to-face video calls where you would hear reflected back to you what you were trying to articulate. So someone else might be able to put words around what you're trying to say, or you could identify, no, that's not exactly it, but something, it's close, and then you could work through it. But I think I discovered that I started off writing on pen on paper and trying to mind map like that, and then writing sort of what I was feeling. It was too tricky. I kept crossing it out and going, no, that's not right, and trying to edit. And so I discovered that I actually really like writing online and the online tools, because the digital tools, because you can go back and iteratively edit until you've honed it and got exactly what's going on for you. And I also really enjoyed being able to Google ideas and go, it's something around this, and then following a train of thought and discovering sort of ideas out there where people have sort of articulated around that, and you can go, yeah, that's exactly it, and bring it back, and then share that with the group and have the group reflect on their experiences and take bits away or provide even alternative sort of perspectives. Yeah, that was amazing. And that conversation element of it just meant that I went so much deeper rather than just sort of, I think my previous courses, I kind of just stayed on the surface and read some bits. I didn't really post much. But the difference when you do actually engage on that level, it just forces you to really focus and nail what it is that's going on for you.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So did anything shift for you?
So many things shifted for me. I think each week things shifted for me. That the very first exercise shifted my mindset from this one of feeling trapped and the weight of the world, my life and my responsibilities and everything, to just one of hope, possibility, excitement about, around those words that I'd chosen to sort of guide me through the course. It was sort of everything that I was needing. It allowed me to identify what I needed. And so just by identifying what I needed allowed me to be positive about it. But I think probably my biggest takeaway, the biggest aha moment, was no longer seeing art as a product to sell to someone else, but see it as an act of creation, and that act is allows me to, or getting in that flow state is when that the authentic self can be expressed. So letting go of this this sort of preconceived notion of what art must look like, or what an artwork, a finished artwork is, and just feeling into that experience of art making, and sort of being surprised by what comes out of that, and enjoying that, and realizing that that is worthy no matter what format it's in, what materials it's in, how many marks there are, how simple it is or how complex it is. I think that process allowed me to sort of let go of this need to compare myself to other artists. So even if I see other artists who are producing things in cardboard, simple sort of things in cardboard, I once upon a time I would have been like, oh, it's all been done. There's no point doing it again. It's been said. I need to be original. I can now see that, oh, so this is just someone else who thinks like me, that I'm not alone in this world. That there's other people who see the world like I do, and that concept of connection again, of like feeling connected to humanity because we have this shared aesthetic. And that's okay, because I know that in my flow state, I'm never going to produce what they've produced. I'm going to produce something that's authentic out of me, and that excites me. And I can trust that process, I don't have to control it. I can just let it happen, and I can trust that whatever comes out of that is okay. It's worthy, it's exciting, and it will bring me joy. And I think that is probably the biggest thing, that now when I go into my practice, I don't have this need to do a painting or a need to complete an artwork. I can just go in and play, and no matter what comes out, I've created.
Yeah.
I've made art, and it's brought me joy. And so I think when I joined the course, I was determined I'm going to make some art products. I'm going to have a framework so that I can make authentic art that I can then sell, and then I'll build my business around that product that I'm selling. And actually, I realized that it's pretty good having a day job where I don't have to rely on selling my art. I don't have to please others. I can actually just enjoy the process for the joy that it brings me. I wouldn't say that I don't want to sell. It's like I still want to share my work, and I think that's about communication. It's about connection with others, about expressing how I see the world. But it's no longer an imperative to make a saleable product that will sell for a lot of money and sit, and then I'll produce more and more, and then be able to have this business model around it. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like you managed to really just take the pressure off of yourself. And as you were talking there, and you were saying all those amazing things about what it is to create and how much you can accept that in yourself now and really value that creative process, that just felt like a huge relief to me, from how we sometimes go into things thinking, right, it's got to be this, it should be this, and I want this outcome, and and all that, like, pressure on us. And what we're talking about is this beautiful creativity that we all have, and it's almost like we kind of stifle it or strangle it before it's had the opportunity to even poke its head up. And regardless around flourishing, it's kind of like we have so much expectation there.
Yes, and I think obviously social media and marketing world is, you can't help but look at that and think, particularly as I was going, okay, I'm going to focus on my art as a business. I was looking at how these artists were sort of promoting themselves, and the kind of work they were producing and the way they were marketing. And I was thinking, okay, I've got to have a product that I can do these steps with. And I think and I think I thought that was going to bring me joy. And I guess I don't necessarily, I sort of see them like, because that's not what I'm producing, and I never have produced, I was like, no, that's okay. I'll find a style, and I'll just produce it, and I'm okay with just having it as a product. I accept that it's not necessarily my arts practice as it's in its raw form. It's a deliberate manipulation kind of thing. but I think throughout the course, I watched my journey go from that mindset to just experiencing joy and acceptance, and really just, I think, like, I was extremely productive during the course, which I know a lot of people tend to just not create. They're sort of focused on this inquiry process and the framework, but it actually just, it reconnected me with that process that I did with my sculpture, where it is really just sort of an intuitive reaction to different materials, and sort of an aesthetic response, and sort of more physical kind of response to the materials, which and then reflecting on it afterwards. So I'd sort of hoped that I would find that process and take it into the painting realm, but ended up with these cardboard assemblages and print making and collages and sort of very expressive kind of drawing mixed media things, and went, actually, this is the art, and it's okay, and I'm actually really loving it. And, you know, if no one else out there loves it, so be it, you know, and I don't have to sell it to feed myself, so that's a bonus.
Yeah. I think the thing is, you're right in saying all those things about, you know, you can have art as a business, you can do all of these things, you can, but it would be much better for that business or the selling part to come from the place where you are when you're speaking of that joy, not when we're trying to shoehorn ourselves into, this is like the way that I think this painting's going to sell, I'm going to try and paint like this, and it's so misaligned with your true self. So it's almost like you're going through this process now, and what you did in Creative Shift, to find that like place where you're joyful and you're creating all of this, you're being really productive, and it's that what will move forward. It's that what could have the potential to become the business, because that's a feeling that you can sustain. You wouldn't be able to sustain something that felt so off for you, or maybe not for very long, and it wouldn't be a happy place for you.
Yeah, it would be, and it would potentially be just a different place, I think, too, because it potentially it would be a business place as opposed to an arts practice place, I think. And I think it was really those conversations in the group that helped me understand that it was more sustainable to have that kind of true and intuitive sort of place to produce from, rather than that kind of constant marketing process side, where and you know, I guess that concept too, that art, you know, people do want to see authentic art. They want to see the person behind it. I guess that's what's attractive when people buy a piece of art, rather than something that they think you're just churning out because it sells and it's an aesthetic that goes on, matches someone's house or something. So yeah, and I think I came from a place where my found object sculptures would break as soon as you moved them. They weren't saleable. You know, I'd spent 30 years making art that wasn't very saleable, and I thought, you know, that I just wanted to have a go at a business where I'm selling a product rather than actually seeing it as my arts practice. So it's very nice to, I mean, the joy that I have, the mental shift, I guess my mental well-being, like, it's so obvious to me, that endorphin release, or that when I'm in flow state and I create something, how much it gives my life meaning. And you know, it's adventure, it's play and discovery. You know, it's a celebration of what's of beauty and the experiences of life, and gives me a sense of autonomy and agency, and just all these things that give life richness. I get from my art. And so if I notice that if I'm feeling a bit flat, all I have to do is step into the studio for a bit and spend some time creating, and it shifts my mental state.
I think you touched on it there about the way at the beginning you were saying the way you see things, the way you describe things in your like a kind of own world of art and creativity. They're the assets that we have as artists, that joy you describe, and sort of get into the real authentic place of you. So when you're in flow, that's what makes you different to the artist standing next to you. That's what makes her different from her, or him different from, and it's so refreshing, I think, when we can start uncovering that, because that really is what makes the work different. You're not going to do anything the same as somebody else when you've really we say it, I talk in the course about if we stay on the surface, we're only ever going to get surface level results. But when you start digging down, whether that's into your visual elements, whether that's into your materials and processes, this is the stuff that makes your work more juicy, than.
And I think that, that noticing what you're noticing, I think I've always done that. But, and I think that's what drove my sculptural practice. I think I was struggling to bring it into that two-dimensional world and I think that habit of noticing what you're noticing around and then coming into flow state in these new mediums that I've been playing with, or I guess maybe using them in different ways, I started to see how these visual elements were creeping in from those spaces around the place that I was noticing. And, I still find myself wishing I could pick up things. Unfortunately, Brisbane's a very clean place and there's not much junk around. So, I'd see, the construct patterns in construction or something like that. And I'd be like, oh, I just want a whole set of those so that I can just arrange them or whatever. And so then it's like, okay, well, let's take it into the two-dimensional world or whatever. And I can start to see now how those bits are coming into my, so those lines and shapes and whatever are coming out in an automatic way without me controlling it, that process in flow state, and then me seeing that result and being like, oh yes, okay, I know. I think it's I'm more aware and more conscious of how those visual elements have come through, and I think that's through that practice, that framework that you've sort of taught us, so that rather than it being a bit haphazard, and it's a much more conscious kind of mindful process of the different stages of all, not even stages, the different tools that I guess I can apply, or that inquiry, that analysis of identifying things that I'll take forward or things that I won't take forward. And so
I think, with as artists and creatives, we're often doing all of the things anyway. We are like naturally doing those, but I think what creative shift allows us to do is really, like you say, it's about the mindful awareness of, okay, when we're doing that, how does that integrate with the rest of my practice? How does this, because I think once we can join all those dots up, it just makes you feel more, well, for me personally, I'm more kind of in control of my practice, and that feels more progressive. It's not that, and I say in the course a lot, we're not doing this to control everything. It's just giving ourselves a guide so that we feel like we are continually moving forward, you know, just in a really gentle way, but we can start connecting all of these dots. So all of the noticing, all of the awareness, the colors that you spot, the lines that you know, how are they all relating to your creative practice? And it just gives us like I guess, a little guide map that makes you feel more confident then.
Yeah, I think that's very much how I would describe it, that this inquiry process, like the framework that you've developed is an inquiry in self, but in an inquiry process we can use in art and life that is sort of a foundation that allows us to just have a direction and a path forward. And that's very much how I use those tools.
Yeah.
To whether it's like a 5-minute moment that it's guiding me through, or whether it's each of those 5 minutes building on each other, you know. So being very time poor, I tend to work quite quickly in really short spurts. And yeah, so I tend to sort of use those. I find I use them in the moment, in the 5-minute moment, and then I'll then see those sort of that them build on each other. So I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say, but I think it's, I wouldn't necessarily, I think it's probably that following the nudges concept, that you'll I will act out this moment, I will create, and it's intuitive, and something will happen from that I can then take the next time I'm in the studio or whatever. I might only have 5 minutes again, and I'll almost start the same way, but then I'll realize that I've taken something from there and expanded upon it unconsciously almost. So a lot of the tools that you've given us are just well, some are very much a mindful and awareness, but some are also now just sort of almost embedded in the practice in an unconscious way, so that you're not having to think, okay, well, what step am I doing, or whatever. They kind of combine together so that you kind of intuitively flow and don't get stuck. I don't find I get stuck anymore. Like, I can enter the studio and keep, you know, I don't think, oh, what am I working on or whatever. I can pick up anything and just start working, because I know that if I just tap into that flow state, something will happen. And often I'll be, you know, it might be that I go, well, I know this worked for me last time, so I'm going to grab that and start there, and just, you know, respond, and whatever happens will lead me in a direction. I don't know that I'm explaining what I'm trying to say at all. But...
You are, and what I'm hearing from you is what I'm hearing is that you are developing your own sort of threads, like continual threads that you can hop back onto, and then even if you stray somewhere else, you've got those anchor points to come back to that are very grounding, and they can, like you say, you're not getting lost. We might have that moment of, oh, what am I doing again? But you can be straight back in, like you describe it as your flow. And I think it's almost like becoming your own art coach, you know, because you're able to sort of do a quick analysis of where you're at. We have all these tools available to us. So yeah, which stage am I at? What do I want to employ? How am I going to get myself over this hump by, you know, and that's why I talk about it being, excuse me, sorry, like a self-guided practice. That's what I would love for artists to be able to adopt, because we don't want to feel stuck in our studios. We don't want to feel, you know, it's those moments are great that they identify, hang on, something's not quite right here, but we want a way forward, you know.
Yeah. And I think that yeah, sometimes it might be a shape or a visual element that I start with, and other times it might be that I'm just going to pick up this cardboard and start cutting and see what happens. And then other times it'll be that I'm just going to get the gel plate out and put, start there and then end up with things that I can collage or whatever. But I think those things that I identified through the framework that that talk to me or that fit with where I'm at in the practice, and that I want to I see producing interesting things from. So then it will be, okay, let's just start with this piece of carpet, or let's start with these shapes. Let's start cutting out those shapes, or let's just get a stick and some ink and do that movement that I did last time or whatever. And so it's those things that I've identified that can carry me through. And it's a continuous process. So it's not just the ones that I identified on that day in that as I did that exercise, but it's now means that I kind of naturally just go, yeah, that worked really well for me, and that fits together. So that continual process of taking those visual elements or that process or that medium,
yeah,
as a starting point when you just don't, when you haven't got a plan or whatever. It's just the starting point that can lead you in a direction, and just being open to what might happen from there.
Amazing. We touched quite a lot there on the different tools that I share. Were there any in particular that stood out for you and that you continue to use today?
I think I probably use all of them throughout my practice. The mind mapping exercise is really valuable. And yeah, I don't know that I've physically gone back to that one and chosen new words, but I think mentally I do that. So I think I allow myself to just sort of kind of explore those concepts in my head, sort of do a bit of an unraveling, and often it's actually while I'm drawing or something like that. So I might just be doing, an ink drawing that's process driven rather than having any rules to it. And it's in those sorts of moments that I might be just allowing my mind to move across those, and unpack and pull threads out. And then I think it's the notice what you're noticing. It's the following your nudges is the big one that's probably really rings for me. And the pause.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of pause. I don't get a lot of pause in my life, and so I do enjoy the pause and just sort of reflecting on, because of the way I work, I tend to work quite quickly and intuitively and sort of just responding quickly to materials and things. So then after that is the reflection period for me, and I start to see themes, and I identify where shapes have come from and what they remind me of and associate with my life and my environment and things like that. So the pause is has always been important to me, and it's very much about going, it's a self-reflection, because I see what's come out of me and I can then go, oh, right, that's what's going on for me. Yeah, it makes sense now, that sort of stuff.
It's so reassuring when we have these moments, isn't it? And you think, yeah, I'm on the right path. And that's like, ooh. What I picked up there was how when we're delivered kind of new ways of thinking or new concepts, so through the course, when I deliver this material each week, it can feel like new ways of thinking or, new approaches. But actually, once they have embedded, like you say, now you're just using them really intuitively. You don't have to go back to like, oh, now I'll do the exercise again. You know, it just becomes something that you take on as part of your practice and use. And that's what my aim for Creative Shift is. And that's not, you know, there's some tools that are going to fit obviously better than others. Some tools that you're just going to pop in your rucksack and that's it, you're off, sort of thing. And you can just pull these out when you want them. And others, they're not for you in your work in practice. But I think what I noticed in the course was how adaptable the exercises were, because we had the group and there was so much communication. It was lovely when people were discussing that exercise for the week or what it was, and then somebody else says, well, I've tried this, well, I did it this way, well, this didn't work for me, so I did this. And I think that's like true creativity, you know, when we can start adapting the new concepts or new perspectives and make them work for ourselves.
That's right. It's a problem solving around it. So, you know, okay, that's not quite working, but I've got this bit that actually did work for me and I'm going to take it in this direction. So, yeah, that's right. I come back to the participation in the group and that, you know, even though it wasn't necessarily the framework, I think it's a really important part of probably your arts practice, is to have the opportunity to talk about it and so if you're not doing it to other people, I think that it's something that I learned, that to spend the time, and I'm not being a big, actually, no, that's not true. I have been a big journaler in the past about my art, but more recently I haven't been. And I think it just is an important part of reflecting and considering and really trying to dig deep. It's taking that time to, I think the writing process it sort of forced me to do that. And that was probably, I haven't probably done a lot of that since the course, of that writing process. I've had to articulate myself to my sister and things like that, what's going on in my arts practice. She's like, oh, is that the kind of art you make these days? But yeah, I think that is probably a really valuable part of what happens through Creative Shift, is that it's not just well, I guess it is the steps. You're making us write these things down and think about these things deeply and articulate these things deeply. And even if it becomes an intuitive part of the practice, I see the value in stopping sometimes and getting back to writing it down.
Yeah.
And not just, because when you do that, you're not just surface, you're going and saying, I wrote that, is that true? What did I mean by that? And, you know, and it sort of leads to another thing, whereas if it's just sort of in the process that you're doing it, you can get distracted by something you're doing that allows you only go to this level on it. So I do think there is value, and it's probably a reminder to self to actually sometimes stop and go and write it down and put it into words, so that it forces me to really go a bit deeper with these things, rather than just skim along the surface for a bit, you know.
I think the whole idea there, it's just opening ourselves up to that inquiry, isn't it? What conversation are you having? Yes, it's with your artwork, but it's actually with yourself. You know, what are you exploring here? And I think if there's people watching that are thinking, oh, but I don't like writing, what's this course going to be? But I like that we have the different options. When I was saying, well, just if you use your phone, you can just voice record. And that's what I do in the studio. I have lots of voice notes to myself, because it's like a way of capturing my thoughts in the moment, and that immediate inquiry I'm having with my painting or with myself or with whatever I'm doing in my playbook, just as a reminder to, oh yeah, right. And then I can maybe expand on that if I wanted to. So there's just all these there's just the different ways, and I think that's part of what creative shift does, is allow you to understand which way works for you, because there's not a
Yeah,
right way, and that's the thing. Just because
yeah,
I say something, that's like obviously my way of doing things. And that's why I always give the option of, if this doesn't work for you, it's great, because you're discovering that something else will, or that's not your
yes,
inroad, so
yeah.
it's a really good way of the self-exploration of how we absorb information, of how we want to
Or
um,
process ideas.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, how much time do you think that you allocated to Creative Shift per sort of week or so?
So, as I said, I'm very time poor. And so I was really trying to fit it in around full-time job and parenting and stuff. And my poor kids were probably very neglected through the course. So my big block of time was probably on the weekends. I'd probably spend the evenings more, checking the Facebook group and following along on the conversations, or on the bus to school and things like that, school to work. And so probably I would say on the weekends, I would do like maybe a 3 hour block of doing the exercise. And then sometimes it would take me, or I might start at the beginning of the week and I would spend half an hour a day trying to put into words and narrowing down until I had a really succinct message about to self that I could also share about what had gone on for me in that. So, but I was very active in my studio. So often, oh gosh, it's really hard to judge. I would probably say I'd probably spent an hour in the day, each day, studio, thinking, reading posts, understanding, thinking about it, and then would spend maybe 3 hours on each day on the weekend typing up and then sharing. And
Mm.
yeah, so I don't know, what's that? Maybe 7 hours
Yeah,
a week, something like that, or a
yeah,
bit more.
yeah. I guess yeah, it's dependent on, yeah, your lifestyle, how much time you have, and then often some of the things, some of the tools that we were considering and implementing, they're the sort of things that happen whilst you're, like you say, on the bus to work or something. And it's, whether
That's
we're
right.
noticing or whether we're considering something or journaling about something. So it's trying to fit it in like, short time snippets. But I think it has
Yeah.
we have the capacity to be able to do that. The course fits that kind of, whether we have a short amount of time or, longer chunks to spend.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I was very inspired. So like some of it would be in art making. I'm including the time that I was art making as well, because I
Yeah.
see it as a direct result of that, and putting into practice some of those things that I was discovering in the process. So, so yeah, I think and my weeks probably varied
Yeah.
as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And you joined most of the Saturday morning calls, well, Saturday evening
Yes.
for you. So they
Yeah,
were,
yeah.
yeah, they were great. Early for me, but a good time for for
In
people on the other
Australia.
side of the world. Um,
Yeah, they were great, those sessions, nice and
they
intimate
were
and
really
very
nice.
productive. So yeah.
Okay, so if there's somebody out there that's watching this video and they're on the fence about taking Creative Shift next year with me, what would you say to them?
I think it can benefit anyone at any point in their practice. So um, whether they're a new beginner or a well-established artist, because it's not about your skills in technique on how to use a medium, or um, it is really those foundational skills that support an artist's practice. So if you're just starting out, then this is a great framework to help you build your practice. And if you're a well-established artist who finds that it's hard to sort of or you tend to work in series and get at the end not sure what to move on to or whatever, this will provide that framework to sort of bridge between your ideas or to help you just get a flow going in your practice. So I think really, and it's not just about your practice. This was an inquiry into self, and it helped me unpack the things going on in my life because they're so intrinsically linked that, you know, your art can't help but be an extension of self and your life. And so really, I think it's an inquiry into self. It's a way to work out what is important to you and to prioritize those things, a way to prioritize those things. And so it's almost therapy in a way, I do think. I mean, looking at the posts in the Facebook group, people were sharing it brought up a lot of personal stuff for people because it's such a deep dive into where people are at and how to move through things. And yeah, I think it's, I don't think anyone will, I think everyone will get something out of it quite profound, to be honest. And the more you participate in that, following along the process, the more you get out of it.
Oh, and Fee, that's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. You mentioned lots of things there that I wasn't aware of how it impacted you in your practice. So thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sally Ann. It was a pleasure talking to you again.
Oh, lovely to see you again. Okay, take care. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, Sally Ann.